The death of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia last weekend has triggered a political fight between President Obama and the U.S. Senate, which may have ramifications here in Colorado. Michael Bennet's re-election bid already had a considerable amount of attention, but now with the slim GOP Senate majority in play, the stakes have been raised even further. Patty, here we have a huge national story, but a Senate race right here in Colorado that this is bound to be a big part of. What do you think?
Well, I think until the Pope jumped into this presidential race, the only other thing we were missing was a dead Supreme Court justice and the suggestion that someone had killed him with a pillow, maybe the Pope. If you've heard that whole theory, that, that he was found with a pillow over his head and it was murder and Obama murdered him. Anyway, this is a crazy, crazy part of this campaign now. Obama is still the president. He is still the president for almost another year. For him to nominate a Chief Justice makes sense. The Senate does have the choice of confirming or not confirming his nominee. So that whole argument just strikes me as yet another bunch of whining in this presidential campaign. And I can't imagine that Colorado's Senate race could get any hotter. So it's an issue, of course, people are going to really be fighting over this seat, but whether they're going to be fighting over this seat, whether or not Obama has already tried to push through a new Supreme Court justice. Gardner is anti-Obama naming anyone, and kudos to Bill Cadman in the State House, because he actually said, hey, no problem. If Obama is going to nominate someone, the Senate has the choice of confirming or not confirming.
Dave, I guess that's where my question starts. What's the better play for the Senate? To be open to a nominee and have an up or down vote and say yes or no, and then likely they'll say no, and let that kind of be the course of action, or to stall the situation?
Well, it's to follow the Constitution. As Patty said, the president has the absolute, uncontrollable right to nominate. It says he shall nominate, and so that's his prerogative. He can nominate anyone he wants. If he nominates people like he has in the past, the previous two justices, or sort of anybody one could conceivably imagine him nominating, the Senate has its own authority to either have a vote or not. As Harry Reid accurately stated when he was leading an attempted filibuster of Samuel Alito's nomination, the Senate has no obligation to give any presidential nominee a vote. Ever. That's their absolute choice. In a way, it's more candid for the Republicans to say no means no. We are not, consent. If you look at the administration's guidance on Title IX, what is consent? There is no consent here. An Obama nominee would be like Sonia Sotomayor, who testified before Congress and said, I consider Heller settled precedent. I testified against her nomination in the Senate Judiciary Committee, said her record is terrible on this issue, and within months, when she was on the Supreme Court, she voted to overrule Heller. Another Obama nomination is virtually certain to create 5 votes to nullify the Second Amendment. Lots of other constitutional rights, like the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which protects First Amendment for exercise of religion, would be in jeopardy. Article 1, which says the president, that says Congress, not the president, has the exclusive lawmaking power. I think an election is a very good time to have a national referendum on do we want a Supreme Court that is going to enforce the text of the Constitution, or one that will supinely bow before the will of whoever wants more and more unchecked power.
Penn, if you're President Obama, which way do you play this? Do you go with a nominee that you know would have no chance, even if you had 3 or 4 years left in your term, or a nominee that's fairly moderate and pushing the hand of the Senate, saying you're not even going to consider someone who is considered by a large group of people as a moderate judge? Which way do you play it?
Well, there are a few ways, as you pointed out. Let me back up for a second and lay a predicate. First of all, I think I take issue with how we frame the question. Justice Scalia's death didn't trigger the fight. What triggered this fight was Senate Republicans announcing the president better not nominate anyone just because it happens to be an election year and there's countless precedent for prior presidents who have nominated Supreme Court justices in the last year of their presidential term. So there's no question about that. Second point that David pointed to is really important. The Constitution says the president shall nominate justices. So it's not a right of the president, it's a mandate and a prerogative. This is your duty. You have to nominate justices for Senate consideration. So whether the president does it or not is not the issue. He has to, consistent with his constitutional responsibility, and he will. In terms of what happens at that point, that's really a problem for the Senate. This president has placed three justices on nominated, I think, 2 justices to the court now. Both have been confirmed. There's been some rancor. It's taken a while, but both have been confirmed. I would also say on the other side, I think Clarence Thomas's nomination took the longest period of time, and that took 100 days, and we have more than 100 days left in the year to get this done. So time is not the issue. Senate Republicans, I think, have to be more careful about this dynamic than the president does. The president can nominate anyone he thinks is qualified. He can play it safe and nominate any number of federal judges he has appointed to the lower courts who have been confirmed by the Senate by votes of 97 to nothing and other overwhelming majorities, or he can pick someone who's not on the bench. The problem Senate Republicans have is trying to come up with a rationale that works with the public in an election year to explain why they're rejecting a candidate, which is why they're taking all these preemptive strikes, because they know they won't have good reasons for anyone the president nominates. So they're trying to lay the groundwork and start some conversation now. And I think they may have shot themselves in the foot, literally and figuratively, Second Amendment notwithstanding.
Ed, let's bring it back to Colorado. How do you think this is going to affect the Senate race between Michael Bennet and a to-be-determined later Republican nominee, one of, I guess, 13 now at this point? How do you think it's going to affect it?
Well, I don't think we know right now simply because of what you mentioned there. There are 13 Republicans. I mean, 5 or 6 who are viewed as legitimate potential candidates in there. And while, the primary could be decided by 1 vote at this point, I don't know that this issue is going to surface as the one that's going to break apart the Republican primary and then is going to affect the differences with Michael Bennet. I mean, you really have to look at who could potentially come out of this. I mean, if this is going to be someone that's extremely conservative, like Tim Neville versus Michael Bennet, I don't know that this really factors into it this much, because this is not like something that would push Neville to being more conservative. If you look at someone like a John Kaiser, who's really trying to make this race about an international, about Bennett's failure to be a strong foreign relations senator, I don't know that it plays a ton into that either, because this is a domestic race. Then you can get to someone like maybe a Ryan Frazier, who could put this into their basket of issues that they can run against Michael Bennet on. All in all, I don't think there are a lot of Coloradans who are trying to decide who to elect in 2016 based on whether or not Cory Gardner is saying we should vote or not on the Senate candidate. I think it will blend into the greater picture of differences between President Obama and the Republican Party, and I think that's going to be what this Senate race is about. Not Michael Bennet versus whoever is put up, but the general attitude of Obama versus the Republicans, and we'll have to see how many issues supplant this in importance between now and November.